Shalom, salam, and hello to those of you who joined us today from your respective countries and organizations. My name is Ken Bob. I live in New York. I'm the president of Amenu and a member of the J-Link Coordinating Committee. Before we begin, we want to explain the translation options for the session. If you want to listen to the event in English, either make no changes or you can select the English channel by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen on the computer or at the top of your screen on your mobile. We are also translating to Spanish and Portuguese. If you require either of those languages, please select them by clicking the globe icon now. I also want to give Heidi and Lara a chance to explain this in Spanish and Portuguese respectively. Heidi and Lara, do you want to say a few words? Well, it looks like translation has actually already kicked off and begun. So I'm just going to go forward. In terms of our session today, I want to first explain that J-Link is an international progressive Jewish network carrying out advocacy efforts worldwide on behalf of dozens of Jewish diaspora organizations. Together with Israeli organizations, we cooperate in support of democracy, religious pluralism, and a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. J-Link supports movements and parties in Israel committed to ending the occupation and achieving peace between Israelis and Palestinians based on the right to self-determination of the two peoples. Our organization is run by 6 delegates from 6 regions. These delegates include Gabriela Savin from the Jewish Democratic Initiative in South Africa, Pablo Lumeram from J. Amlat in Latin America, Alon Liel from the Policy Working Group in Israel, Giorgio Gomel from J-Call Italy in Europe, Barbara Landau from J-Space Canada, and myself, Ken Bob, from Amenu in the United States. In addition, we work with dozens of organizations and individuals around the world. Your participation is a testament to the strength of our shared network. Over 360 people have registered for this event from countries around the world. For more information on J-Link, you can visit our website, jlinknetwork.org, or email us at jlinkoffice@gmail.com. And now for today's program. As you all know, the last Palestinian election took place in 2006. An agreement among all the Palestinian factions was reached to hold elections for the Palestinian Legislative Council on May 22nd, to be followed by the presidential elections on July 31st, and the PLO's Palestinian Legislative Council on August 31st. There has been much written about the challenges that exist to even hold these elections, and of course, what the results will look like. To answer these questions and others, we've invited some experts to share their thoughts and observations with us today. I must say at the beginning that Razi Hamid, who was listed as a panelist on the first invitation, dropped out of the program. So we have 3 remaining wonderful panelists who I will introduce momentarily and will open with remarks at the beginning. I'll direct some questions to the panelists and we'll open them up to you. Please use the Q&A box that can be found at the bottom of your Zoom screens. A reminder that if you experience Zoom issues, we're also streaming live on our Facebook page. All you have to do is search J-Link Network on Facebook and you'll find us. Finally, I want to thank Gabriela from JDI and Mickey Golod from Amenu, and we'll try to get to as many questions as you can as they help me field them. So without further ado, I want to thank our panelists for their willingness to participate and introduce them. Their full bios appear on the J-Link website, and I encourage you to return there after the program to read them. Ashraf al-Adrami is a former Palestinian Authority minister, currently works as journalist for the Al-Ayah newspaper and several magazines, and is a resident of Ramallah. Dr. Dalal Irkat is VP for International Relations and an assistant professor at the Arab American University of Palestine. She's also a senior advisor for strategic communications for the Prime Minister's office and has a weekly column in Al-Quds newspaper, also lives in Ramallah. Dr. Sufyan Abu Zaida is a former Palestinian Authority minister and currently serves as the director of the master's program in Gaza. He also lectures at several Palestinian international universities and lives in Gaza. So I'm going to ask first Ashraf to open up with some opening comments. Go ahead.
Good evening, good morning for the Americans also, and North America. I'll say the following. This time, it seems that the elections will be held by the all Palestinian factions, not just because there are dates for elections for the Legislative Council and the presidential one, and also after that for the Palestinian National Council. But also because the two main parties, it means Fatah and Hamas movements, have no choice but to go to elections. President Mahmoud Abbas wants to show himself as the sole representative of the Palestinian people, especially after a question of the Israeli side about whom he represents, and if it is implemented in Gaza or not, and if there is an agreement with the Palestinian leadership, Hamas will be a part of it or not. It is very important for President Mahmoud Abbas nowadays to present himself as the representative of all the Palestinians and Hamas within his people and community to be represented by himself. Also, there is a new maybe positive stage from President Mahmoud Abbas' point of view after the American elections, especially after the failure of Trump and being Joe Biden as the president of the United States of America, and his assurance of commitment to two-state solution. President Mahmoud Abbas sees it is an opportunity to start maybe a new political process with the American administration. He should be ready to the time that it will be a new maybe round of negotiations or talks between Palestinians and Israelis, and even with the Americans. And for Hamas movement, Hamas has failed to have legitimacy after 14 years of ruling Gaza Strip. And the regional countries told Hamas that the only way to get the legitimacy is to be part of PLO under the auspice of President Mahmoud Abbas. Without the umbrella of President Mahmoud Abbas or Fatah movement, Hamas cannot get legitimacy and cannot be recognized, even if it will be for long, maybe decades in Gaza Strip as the ruler there. Also, Hamas failed to fulfill its commitments to people, especially to respond to the essential demands of the Palestinians in Gaza Strip. The siege and the unemployment percentage, which passed 50%, and the poverty and the all problems in Gaza Strip, the lack of electricity, lack of water for drinking, and lack of everything. Hamas was about to be collapsed maybe 2 years ago, when the situation was so bad that people started to uprise against Hamas, and Hamas succeeded to deliver this uprising towards defense towards Israel. but there is no guarantee that Hamas will keep delivering the people upset and anger towards the Israeli side. Because of that, Hamas thinks that the only way to get rid of this heavy duty in Gaza Strip is to make President Mahmoud Abbas or Palestinian Authority return back to Gaza in one condition, that Hamas doesn't give up its weapons. And now Hamas also wants to, as a part of these elections, to be represented in the Palestinian National Council and to be part of the legitimacy, the Palestinian legitimacy, especially PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. I think this is the first time that it is so serious that elections may held and may be a reality. But unfortunately, the Palestinian people doesn't believe that it will be elections, but if it will be a reality, that after the voting and after having results, after establishing the new legislative council, I think Palestinian people will be believe that it is now a reality, not just like every time. I will stop here. Just the last sentence in this aspect is the Israeli position. Until this moment, we didn't hear anything from the Israeli government. And I think the Israelis, they want to see what will happen with their elections and who will be the prime minister and the new government. And this government may have the position towards the Palestinian elections, especially towards the participating of the East Jerusalem Palestinian citizens.
Well, as most of you know, for the past 16 years, the Palestinians did not have any elections. Of course, for first and all, it is the Palestinians to blame for not having worked democracy at its best. However, we are very looking forward for the elections to take place in May and July. Having said so, there are certain facts that we need to consider. And here comes the international community's role and Israel's role as well. In your introduction for this session, you have mentioned that the Palestinian and Israeli and international communities have been calling for elections in Palestine to develop the Palestinian democracy and to strengthen its perspective and institutions and to reinforce its legitimacy to end decades of long Israeli-Palestinian conflict. However, what everybody should know that back in 2006, when Palestinians had democracy, the international community nor Israel respected the result and the outcome of Palestinian democracy. So the question that one should ask today, will any results of the coming elections be respected as the Palestinian democracy, or is the world and the international community waiting for a tailored democracy that fits their expectations? Number two is Israel. Everybody knows that in Palestine, yes, we do have a Palestinian Authority. However, it is deprived from serious authorities. I mean, even if the president wants to move from a city to another or wants to cross borders, he needs permissions from the Israeli authorities. Until today, the Israeli position is not clear about the facilitation of holding elections. So for example, are we gonna have logistics easily undertaken for Palestinians to go and cast their voices in votes in Jerusalem and in Gaza? Well, If not, let's remember back in 2006, yes, we were able to hold elections in Jerusalem, in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank under tight restrictions. And here I have to clarify for the Jewish people of the world that East Jerusalem was divided in terms of Palestinians voting into what was called J1 and J2. Only 6,000 Palestinians were allowed to vote inside the city of Jerusalem, and others who amounted to more than 20,000 Palestinians were asked to leave the borders of Jerusalem and go and vote outside the walls. However, the question today, would those Jerusalemites, Palestinians of Jerusalem, be able to practice their right in casting their vote or not? This is a question to be asked to Israel and the government of Israel, and their obligation to facilitate the process of democratization and the upholding of elections in Palestine. On the internal level, my concerns, even if we hold the elections, and I hope that they will be facilitated and will be undertaking smoothly with the help of the Israeli government and the international community. However, what really concerns me, internally speaking, is the outcome of those elections, not in terms of the political affiliation or the political party which will win the majority of votes. I am not here to judge which is a better party. What I am really looking for in the Palestinian democracy is to have more youth included in the Palestinian Legislative Council, is to have more women represented. And I fear that the way that the lists are being shaped and the internal politics that are being undertaken, especially the negotiations between the internal political factions, I am fearing that it will be more of a power sharing structure rather than a democratic process. I am fearing that it will be a reproduction of the same system, and I am hoping that we will see more youth involved and more women involved and more new faces involved. And I'm not talking here about new faces alone, but hoping that new faces would bring about new mindsets and new ways of thinking. On the Palestinian level, people are asking, when it comes to elections, would elections lead to unity? Would elections and division and lead to reconciliation? Well, this question could be answered depending on how the election, the lists are being formed. So do we want, for example, I would say that elections is, for me as a scholar and from a theoretical perspective, elections should only be a tool, a mean for democracy. However, given the Palestinian internal politics today and the deadlocks for the reconciliation file, it might lead to unity if the major political parties agree to run elections in a joint list. However, if they do so, yes, they might guarantee a step one towards unity and ending the division. However, they will take democracy out of its content, if I may say. One more thing that I want to shed light on tonight is that what is very, very important for the Jewish community around the globe to realize that the Israeli elections are coming beforehand the Palestinian elections. And my message tonight for the Jewish communities and for the active Jewish people who work and for peace in this region and this part of the world is that it is time to replace Netanyahu. It is time to bring about a better policymaker, peacemaker, who is less extreme than Netanyahu. So I'm truly hoping that the Israeli elections would bring about a better leadership in Israel, a better, less extreme and more peaceful leadership that would opt to end this conflict, to end this occupation, and to end the sufferings on daily basis of every Palestinian. Again, on the Palestinian level, I hope that democracy will take place. And maybe next week with the events unfolding, we will know better of how the formation of the lists and elections will be going. I'll stop here. Thank you, and we'll be looking forward for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those really useful introductory remarks. To our listening audience or viewing audience, I want to apologize. Our third panelist, Dr. Sufyan Abu Zaida, is experiencing significant internet problems. I can't say it's specifically because of his situation with Gaza, but that is where he lives and that's where he's having his internet problems right now. So we're going to continue without him. He's trying to reconnect, and if he does, we'll obviously slot him in to speak. So Ashraf, I have a question for you that's been several people have asked. In your opening comments, you talked about Hamas as having failed their constituents in Gaza during their time of running the area. But others suggest that Fatah also comes up for criticism, both in its lack of success in implementing the Oslo Accords, and also for criticism of, I guess, what we call cronyism in Ramallah among the leadership of Fatah. Do you think that's going to hurt Fatah in these coming elections?
I think the two movements and all Palestinian factions realize that there is no way to face the Israeli policy, especially expansion of settlements and destroying the option of two-state solution without being united and without having a united political program. And I think because of that, they started this unity even before elections, when they agreed, all factions agreed on the non-violent program to resist the Israeli occupation using the non-violent uprising or popular resistance. And this may be the main subject that brought the all parties, especially Hamas and Fatah, to go to elections and to have unity within PLO and within the Palestinian government. And I think it also will help the two movements, Fatah to go ahead in its policy to maybe to prepare itself to negotiations or to put pressure on Israel, because the only way is to make the international community intervenes in the political process. Without that, Israel cannot give anything for Palestinians, because there is no even relative balance between the two sides. Because of that, nothing can come from any kind of direct or bilateral negotiations without intervention from the international community. And I think the Fatah movement now, because it is the also wants to have this unity to strengthen itself in front of Israel, and also to face the difficulties on the ground, and also to present itself as a part of the with the main legitimate party with all factions within PLO. And for Hamas also, it is an opportunity to be a part of the Palestinian National Council and to have legitimacy. And for that, Hamas even give up the main positions in the Palestinian government. For example, Hamas accepted the principle that it won't be the prime minister won't be from Hamas movement, and the foreign affairs minister also won't be from Hamas movement, and other main positions on the Palestinian government. to ease the acceptable of the Palestinian government, which Hamas will be a part of. So Hamas now searched for legitimacy and will give up many things to have this legitimacy. And because of that, I think it is the interest of the two parties or the two movements to have this unity and to start with elections. I don't think that elections itself will be the unity, but elections may be the start of this process and may also change the situation on the ground, especially in Gaza Strip.
So before I ask Dalal a question, I just want to let everyone know that I just got a text from Sufyan, who said, "I'm sorry, the internet is not working well. There's very heavy use in the evening hours in Gaza. All the time I'm getting kicked off." So we apologize. He's going to keep trying to get on, but we're going to continue with our two panelists. So Dalal, you mentioned in your opening comments about the importance of getting youth, women, and new faces involved, and not just new faces, but new ideas. I'd like you to go into that a little more detail, especially in light of Ashraf suggesting that this is what's going on here is really a unity government of the existing elements. Where is the room for young people and women and new ideas if that's the direction?
Well, yeah, and tomorrow is the 8th of March to commemorate International Women's Day. I have to mention that there was a presidential decree by President Mahmoud Abbas back in January, where he did raise the quota for women. However, I am ambitious for more inclusive quotas for women to engage women participation more seriously on elections. So far, I'm not confident that we will see big change in this authority that we have. However, Bob, I would like to answer a couple of questions which were put in the chat room, and to start with Shula, who asked about how the Israeli elections result would affect the Palestinian voters. Well, when the Palestinian citizen who had believed in the Palestinian leadership, which went into the peace process 3 decades ago, whose hopes were raised for peace, and 3 decades later, we see that the situation on the ground is deteriorated with more settlements and more confiscations and more apartheid policies with the extreme right-wing government. Yes, when we see a different result in Israel, maybe this will bring room for more moderates in the whole region, including the Palestinian election results. It will raise hopes, and it will, I'm confident it will affect the behavior of the Palestinian voter when we see a better outcome in the Israeli elections. So I here urge again, every one of you and the Jewish influencers and pro-peace Jews around the world to try to play your roles inside and outside Israel to bring about a more moderate leadership. Regarding the question on Hamas's existence and its rejection of Israel, allow me to remind you that the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, had recognized the right of Israel's existence in 1991. What did they have in return? I mean, why are you worried about a political faction to recognize Israel or not? I mean, the PLO, which is the sole representative, had recognized Israel's right to existence. However, on the other hand, none of the Israeli leaders until today had recognized the right of the Palestinian people for self-determination and to live in an independent and sovereign state. So this is another question that we have to be addressing. However, I have to also mention here that Sharon's unilateral disengagement from Gaza back in 2000 did strengthen and empower Hamas, whether we like it or not. Let us all remember that when he withdrew from Gaza, he withdrew unilaterally, and he did not coordinate or discuss the withdrawal or the disengagement from Gaza with the existing PNA or Abbas's Arafat at that time governments. So let us just raise a point about who is facilitating the sustainability of the regime in Gaza, given the cash money that is being, for example, poured into Gaza. This is a question that has to be raised to the Israeli authorities as well. Do you have a question, Bob?
No, go ahead, finish your thought, and then I want to ask Ashraf something as well.
I just wanted to go over the questions.
Well, let me toss a couple to Ashraf that I think are relevant for him, and we'll come back to you.
Sure.
So Ashraf, a number of questions have come up. Obviously, as both of you have said, Israel is tied into this whole process in every way, before, during, and after. So a couple of the questions related to Israel here, I'd like to ask your view on. So the couple people, Joseph and Akash, asked about the press stories that the Israeli authorities are arresting Hamas candidates for the parliament, for the Palestinian legislature, with the cooperation of Fatah. So I wonder if you have any information about that. And then the second question is, after the Israeli elections, do you think that if Netanyahu does indeed lose, and we already will talk about that at a different time, the Israeli elections, his replacement could be someone also from the right wing? That's more likely than not. Do you think that will still give more opportunities for opening up negotiations with the Israelis? So it's a two-part question: Israeli involvement in the election now, and what could happen with Israel after their election.
Yes, so the first question about the involvement of the Israeli authority to maybe to harm or damage the Palestinian Authority image, or maybe to prevent the situation of holding the new elections. I think the Israeli side now tries to do its best without saying anything to arrest or to prevent Hamas candidates to participate in the elections or to run to elections. And I think the Palestinian Authority cannot cooperate with the Israelis in this issue. And there are also complaints from the Israeli side that Hamas movement started to demonstrate, for example, in Hebron and other places, even with guns, and the Palestinian Authority did nothing to stop them. I think it is a very critical period for the Palestinian Authority. The main issue here is to make the elections succeed and to have the new Palestinian Legislative Council. And because of that, the Palestinian Authority won't go to any kind of arresting Hamas candidates or to cooperate with the Israeli side to damage this democratic process. And I think we will see something from the Israeli government until the elections, and maybe it will be some kind of opposition, silent opposition, to have these elections. We have also the question for the Israeli government: what will happen when will be the new Palestinian Legislative Council and new Palestinian government? How Israel will deal with the outcome of these elections, and if the Israelis will continue their siege on Gaza Strip and to prevent any kind of improvement of the daily life in Gaza, especially the unhuman conditions that people live under. These are questions for the Israeli government. This is for the first question, and I forgot the second one. If you
After the Israeli elections, if indeed Dalal's wish comes true, and many of our wishes come true, and Netanyahu is no longer the prime minister, it's likely the prime minister will still come from the right side of the political spectrum. Do you think that will still give opportunity for renewed peace talks?
You know, we see all the Israeli candidates to be prime ministers, if they are Benjamin Netanyahu, Gideon Saar, Naftali Bennett, or even Yair Lapid. All of them have no program to have two-state solution to end the occupation. Maybe Yair Lapid more moderate than the others, but we don't see Israel goes to a new process, political process that can lead to a two-state solution. But what we want here is the international intervention, especially from United States of America and Security Council. We are speaking about the quartet. We have now two quartets, the international quartet and the Arab quartet. And maybe it will be some kind of cooperation between the two quartets to start a process. The Palestinian leadership calls for international conference because they believe that there is no chance to get anything from the Israeli side through bilateral negotiations or any talks with the Israeli government. We have in this movie before, and the last round of negotiation was held by the Americans during the 2014 when Barack Obama was the president and John Kerry was Secretary of State. It lasted for 8 months without having any kind of progress. The result was big zero. We don't want to return back to a situation to negotiate with the Israelis on the same conditions. Because of that, we want to have the international intervention, the international maybe conference, at least to have such kind of pressure to make the Israeli government realize that there is no choice but to go to a two-state solution. But we don't see the circumstances in Israel, even after the elections, will help to have this maybe this progress.
Dalal, I was wondering if you could answer some of the questions we have from Judith Harrell and Charles Kremer about other parties. All we're hearing about is Hamas and Fatah, and we're not hearing about other parties. Are there other parties? Is it possible for new parties to appear? You know, one thing that we complain about on the Israeli side is every election, new parties pop up and then disappear. And on the Palestinian side, it seems to be two parties that dominate and no one else can get in. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, on the Palestinian political scene, we have around 14 political parties, which are, most of them are part of the PLO. However, when it comes to reality and political practice, unfortunately, not so many parties have better luck than Fatah or Hamas. And at the Arab American University, we have conducted a survey to examine people's behavior vis-a-vis elections. Next week, we will share the results. However, the results are not very new to us. And so this is on the political parties. I just wanted to clarify one point on my call for Netanyahu's change. I'm not saying that whoever will replace Netanyahu will be better. However, some people might say that the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. However, it's about time for change in the Israeli politics. Same as for the Palestinian politics. I'm a strong believer that change is healthy, no matter who it is. I'm not very optimistic about who would replace Netanyahu and how better that person would be, for example. Another message that, but things needs to be corrected in the Israeli politics as well as in the Palestinian politics scenes. For example, if I were Jewish, I would be very, very ashamed of the nation state law of the 2018. This is one point that I think your community needs to be raising and shedding light on. If you really care about the strategic existence of the state of Israel, or of the reputation of the state of Israel. So those are things that I want the Israeli community, the Jewish communities, and the Palestinian communities to be thinking of, to look for change, and to do and play our parts in changing those realities. You know, for example, in Palestine, somebody asked me, and I apologize, I forgot the name, and Ken, you know, I'm a mother of three. In Palestine, you cannot travel freely. Somebody asked me about my priorities if I were a decision maker here in Palestine. Well, I happen to be the daughter of Saeb Erekat. My father dedicated his life for peace and for dialogue and for negotiations. He promised his people, and he worked so hard to bring about a better life for me and my siblings and for his grandchildren. He wanted to have them protected, to have them live in peace and security, the same along with the Israeli children and the Jewish children of the world. However, he could not deliver. He could not deliver. And he was very severely criticized by his own people, not because he lacked merit, not because he was not a nationalistic figure, but because he did not deliver the peace promises and the state and the human rights and the civil rights that he had promised his people. Somebody is talking about the two-state solution today. You know, I invite every one of you to come and visit the region here. I invite you to come to Ramallah. I will be very happy to host you here and to speak to you and to take you around, to see how the Palestinian cities and villages are split by settlements. We have more than 200 settlements today. We have more than 711,000 settlers who are dividing every Palestinian city. So do we want a two-state solution? Yes, it is the best case scenario, but is it realistic any longer? This is a question that the moderates of this world and the pro-peace people have to be raising and objectively addressing. Yeah, somebody is, thank you very much for your comments and those who agree with my points. So if every one of this, the jailing group and the Jewish people of the world are caring about the strategic existence of the state of Israel, the allies and the friends of Israel should be working for an immediate two-state solution, because, you know, violence will only lead to violence. And if the Palestinian rights are not guaranteed as soon as possible, don't expect much from the Palestinian people. When you leave people hopeless, don't expect much but violence. I mean, people here, and I will be speaking about Gaza since, I mean, life standards are very, very, very low. When you talk about the right to water, the right to mobility, the right to education, the right to worship, even my kids, I mean, when I commute from Ramallah to Jericho, they have to cross checkpoints. They have to witness the Israeli soldiers with rifles and guns pointed at the car. I mean, those are the questions that are being, or the scenes that we get to experience and witness on a daily basis as Palestinian citizens. We don't know the normal Israeli citizen. We don't get to meet them. We only meet the soldiers. So when people talk about hate being taught in Palestinian schools, for example, allow me to tell you, as a Palestinian mother who has 3 children in Palestinian schools, this is not true. I call myself a civilized mother. I raise my kids to respect Judaism, to respect Christianity, and to respect Islam. And I always tell my kids that we did not choose our religion. I don't think any of us had converted from Judaism to Islam, or from Islam to Judaism. We were born like that. And for that reason, I am for more civilized education for all our kids, for the generations to come, that we all deserve to live as human beings. We all deserve to live in dignity and civil and human rights, equally speaking. Do we want a one-state solution? That would be amazing. But I know in reality, it is more of a wishful thinking. However, now, my message to the Jewish communities of the world, if you are caring about the strategic existence of Israel, then you have to be working and putting pressure on Israeli leadership to grant Palestinians their rights of self-determination and statehood and sovereignty and independence.
Thank you very much. I was actually going to reference your father at the end of the program, Dalal, and talk about what a good friend he was, frankly, to our international movements. There's no question many of us knew him personally, considered him a friend, and he's greatly missed, obviously, most importantly, to you as a father and as a grandfather, but also for all of us around the world, his international family who knew the commitment he had to our joint cause. So I'm happy that you mentioned him, and we obviously echo those words very, very strongly. Ashraf, I'm going to come back to you with some questions that have been coming up in the Q&A about sort of inside Fatah and associated with Fatah when it comes to the presidential elections. There's been questions mentioned and about how does this all together work, and I mentioned there's first legislative elections, and then there's the presidential election. And two of the candidates who have been rumored to be ready to challenge the sitting president, one is Marwan Barghouti, who's in Israeli prison, and the second one is Mohammed Dahlan, who is in the UAE. Can you comment on how you view both Barghouti and Dahlan in the conversation about the elections in general?
Yeah, this maybe the hardest question, how to see the presidential elections. Until this moment, there is no obvious candidate to run these elections. Even Marwan Barghouti until this moment didn't say clearly that he will run to presidential elections. But some maybe colleagues of him who are very close to Marwan Barghouti said that he insists to run to presidential election, and because of that, he has no list for legislative council, or even he doesn't want to be a candidate in the legislative council. I don't know what will happen after a while, but until this moment, people doesn't or aren't busy in the presidential elections. They are now establishing their list to legislative council presidential elections, and after a while, it will be the opportunity to handle the presidential elections. Until this moment, no one can say who will be the candidates of these presidential elections. But for Mohammed Dahlan, it won't be the case. Mohammed Dahlan will be prevented to run to presidential elections because there was decision of the Palestinian court against him. He was charged of of having maybe money, illegal money, and for maybe criticizing the President Mahmoud Abbas with a very bad way. I don't know, somehow they have a court sentence against him for 3 years, and because of that, he will be prevented to run as a candidate for presidential elections. And he also declared that he won't run in this stage. So maybe Marwan Barghouti, the only one who is close to be a candidate in these elections. Others, until this moment, didn't say any word or single word to be a candidate or to run in these elections.
Dalal, I want to give you a chance if you want to comment as well on the issue of candidates for the presidency and Barghouti specifically. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'd like to talk about presidential elections later. Maybe once after we have legislative elections and the picture is
Okay.
clearer.
That's fine. That's fine. So what I'd like to do, we obviously lost one of our panelists. The two of you have worked very hard. You did your overtime in answering the questions, and we actually have covered most of the questions about the elections themselves. I want to give you each, if you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience, questions that you may have seen come up that are not specifically related to the elections. There were a lot about ICC and one state solution and everything else. So this is if you have any extra thoughts you'd like to add to share with our audience before we conclude. I'll let you go first, Dalal.
Well, thank you very much. Well, again, inspired by my upbringing, I urge every one of you to believe in your own role in bringing change into our realities. So for my father's soul to be rested, I urge every one of you to continue to work for peace, to continue to bringing change into our reality, and for more equal rights for the Palestinian and Israeli citizens, for the children and for the grandchildren who live on this side of the world. On the ICC, I just want to clarify to those who don't understand very well or who did not read well, the ICC is the last resort, and it is, allow me to say, an uncontested tool, legal tool, that the Palestinians had opted to after decades of living under occupation. My own cousin was murdered back in June on the checkpoint from Abu Dis leading to Bethlehem on his sister's wedding day. He was murdered. So for my uncle, for his soul, and his body is still withheld by the Israeli authorities. So the practices of the Israeli regime are so racist and are so inhumane to the point that you leave the Palestinian citizens deprived from any right even to ask for their own justice. So the ICC did issue the decision on opening the investigation. It is not now judging the Israelis for war crimes. They had declared an official investigation where they will be investigating Palestinian as well as Israeli actions or so-called crimes. But for any human being, and especially Palestinian, if you have any, if you want to ask for accountability, where do you go? Seriously, where do you go? We tried as a family of Erekas for my cousin to go to the Israeli courts, and we tried different human rights organizations since June. We couldn't do anything. The Israeli courts every month, they keep postponing the trials. So I just want you to look at the International Criminal Court as a last resort for the Palestinian people. It is a diplomatic and legal tool that we are using. And it is not unilateral, if somebody would say. It is not unilateral, it is legal, it is diplomatic, and it is an investigation and power to justice. I think all of us should agree on that point. Again, I would like to thank you all very much. Thank J-Link for their work, and for each one of you for your time and for your energy in bringing peace and better realities in our region.
Thank you very much, Dilla. So Ashraf, I'd like to give you your last word as well. I did see that Alon Liel, our coordinating committee member, asked about the influence that Nasser El-Kidwa, Arafat's nephew, has within Fatah in these elections as well. So I want to make sure that Alon's question gets asked, because he's been instrumental in putting this panel together. And anything else you'd like to add in your final remarks, Ashraf?
Yes, about the Fatah movement. Fatah is not central movement. Because of that, it may have 2 or 3 lists from Fatah movement. One led now by Nasser Qudwa, the nephew of President Yasser Arafat, and also maybe with others, with Dahlan list and with others, and will be also from Salam Fayyad side, it will be a list, and maybe from the leftist wing in PLO will be another list. So it will be a group of lists in this election, And I think it will also it will be healthy for the Palestinian democracy to have or many lists and to run even within the one movement, even if it will be hard for Fatah to get majority or a big amount of voters if it is not united. But also the situation by the new system of elections, relative one, like Israel, lists of groups or factions or parties, it may give Hamas the only part of Hamas voters and give Fatah and others their part of voters, and it won't give any party the majority of the Legislative Council. It means the new government will be any factions or lists, maybe from Hamas, Fatah, other factions, and maybe from Salam Fayyad and Dahlan, I don't know, but this is the situation. I want to add something about the ICC. We Palestinians don't need the ICC. We need a solution. We need to end the occupation and to have an independent Palestinian state. The only way to get this is negotiations between the two sides to return back to the international terms of reference, how to have this solution. If we go there and have this solution, I think there is no need to the ICC or any kind of courts or maybe international forums and others. The only thing that can help the two people to live in security, stability, and peace in this region is to end the occupation and to end the conflict once forever. This is the only way. And I hope that the Jews all over the world, especially in the United States of America, because they have their influence on Israel, to push the Israeli government, the new government after the elections, and also to cooperate with the American administration to push the Israeli government to go to a two-state solution, to end the occupation, and to give the Palestinian people the freedom and the independence and the opportunity to live as the all people in the whole world. This is, I think, the only guarantee to live here in prosperity, peace, development, and security for all people. I hope that you have the role to help the two people, Palestinians and Israelis alike, to reach the moment of ending the occupation and having equal rights on this land, the land for the two people, in two states, for one state for each people. This is the only way to live in a respectable way in this land. And I think it is the time for the Palestinian people to have its rights. I think there's no more time to save the two-state solution if the Israel government will continue its policy, expansion, settlements, and building everywhere in West Bank to prevent or to destroy the option of two-state solution. It should be stopped, and the American administration the Jewish people all over the world should help in this issue to make the two-state solution a viable one and to save it from destroying by the Israeli government and the Israeli policy. Thank you. I hope you all the best.
Well, thank you both for your presentations. And I want to say that in a lot of ways, both of your calls for the global Jewish community to engage around this issue is the very reason why J-Link was established. Not only for educational programs like this, but also for advocacy. Last summer, when the threat of annexation was held over our heads, we organized an international diplomatic campaign where Jews from all over the world went to Israeli diplomats and basically said, not in our name. So we definitely resonate with your call for our engagement, and we will invite everyone on this call to go visit our website. Gabby has been putting it in the chat, I can see. I also want to thank our interpreters, Heidi and Lara, for translating all of this into Spanish and Portuguese. It's not easy, I know. I also want to thank Mickey and Gabi for helping me behind the scenes on the moderation. And one last word, Dalal and Ashraf, thank you so much. And regarding your calls for a two-state solution as soon as possible, inshallah. So thank you both again.
Thank you all.
I wish everyone a good day.